I was talking about this earlier with this New York Times editorial. Have you seen the hysteria surrounding this? I mean, you would think that the top Trump administrative staff, Trump advisors, all came together, 10, 12, 15 of them, and signed a document saying the president had to go because he was mental. It's one anonymous person. Do you have this person in your workplace? There's one in most offices. This is a guy who is or gal, but it's usually a guy. I don't know why, at least in my experience anyway, perpetually disgruntled because they think they could run the place better. And they walk around whining and complaining behind the boss's back. Oh, I need to do that. And it reaches a point with this idiot where they feel they have to take matters into their own hands. And they'll even tell you they're going to do it. I can actually think of this, just 2 workplaces I know of where this happened. They're going to go above the boss's head. They're going to go outside the company. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, depending, what the command structure is. And they're going to tell them what's wrong with what the boss is going to do. And they assume that that the company's going to appreciate their input. And the whole time you're thinking, yeah, okay, that's not going to go well for you. That's not a good career track for you. Not going to help you at this company and definitely not going to help you in the industry. But they think that the upper management could be so grateful for their suggestions because guess what? Let me ask you this. Let me put it this way. Have you ever had a boss where you agreed with everything they did? The way they ran everything 100% of the time? I never have. I haven't. I've had great bosses. I've had really crappy ones. I've had some that were an outright joke. But I can't say that I've agreed with the way that everybody has done every single thing. And have you ever had the experience then of either getting promoted and being in your boss's shoes, maybe being going into assistant manager, or you get some way, an insight into why they do the things they do that you didn't get, but you didn't have before? And like maybe there was some office politics you didn't realize they had to navigate around and they're as frustrated as you are, or something like that. You ever had that happen? I've had that happen too, going, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I'd have to do that too. I don't like it, but I'd have to. I've had that happen as well. There is one of those guys in every office. And a lot of the time, sometimes they will end up doing, and I've watched them commit career suicide too. Oh, the upper management will totally want to know everything my boss does wrong and how I would do it better. Do you know how that looks to the upper management? Like a temper tantrum by an immature person who doesn't get the social rules of the workplace. In my experience, that's generally how it's taken by the upper management. And that person is often ushered out the door. I've never seen the boss lose that fight. But in this case, this person is in the New York Times. And they're given the utmost credibility. I have no idea who they are. I mean, is it Omarosa? Seriously, no, is it Omarosa? Omarosa was given total credibility. We find out she was fired by the Clinton administration 3 separate times. At least once for lying. People magazine reported that, by the way. I had to get away. Her last gig at the Clinton administration lasted weeks. They couldn't take her anymore. Is this a person like that? We don't know. They are presumed to have the utmost credibility, believability, or are they like that wacko in your office who is totally misreading the social cues of the situation? Thinking of the upper management would really appreciate their largely uninformed theories on how the boss ought to be running the office. And you're thinking, dude, don't do it. I don't know. I've even told one of these people, I wouldn't do that. I would probably just sit back. No, I'm going to write a letter. Okay. They're usually a little off, aren't they? Not totally off. I mean, they might not be a bad person, but a little off socially. See where I'm going with this? And there's another problem. Speaking of being a little off, or maybe a lot off, the New York Times has a history of lying about their anonymous sources. In fact, a few years back, they were caught red-handed deceiving their readers. They were writing about fracking. They were trying they wanted to trash fracking because they hate energy because it runs businesses. They hate businesses, prosperity, and whatnot. So you got to get the energy shut down in businesses so everyone can be as miserable as you are. That's how the left operates. So they wrote an article about fracking, and that it was like this big Ponzi scheme, and they were trying to defraud investors. They didn't really think it would work very well going forward. Anyway, they quoted high-ranking industry officials, senior insiders in the fracking industry, and energy analysts journalists who would know. 3 of them, all anonymous. Right? Well, a Senate committee began investigating this, and it just so happened that these people actually worked at the Energy Information Agency government organization. The senators got the emails. And guess what? There weren't 3 anonymous sources. They lied. It was only 1 anonymous source that they had quoted from this person's emails and made it look like 3 anonymous sources had, said this stuff. It was 1. And the one, the high-ranking industry official, the energy leaders in the industry, it was an intern who was in college. They lied. They got a history of it. Now, do you remember the phase that they were going through where they would hire ombudsmen? These papers who would go and check their credibility. They were supposed to be independent, right? They didn't answer to anybody. They could go and check the credibility of articles in these newspapers. Washington Post had one, New York Times. And they would tell us, oh, no, we checked it. It's credible, blah, blah, blah. The Senate investigation that found the New York Times lied about the fracking industry using anonymous sources was flagged by the New York Times public editor and ombudsman Arthur Brisbane, who concluded that an intern is not an official and certainly not a high-ranking official in the industry and definitely not 3 high-ranking officials, just 1. So they fired the reporter, right, and retracted the article? No, they fired Arthur Brisbane. They don't have a public editor anymore and stood by their article, even though the Senate committee concluded they had been lying. So these are the same people, the same New York Times, the same liars. Propagandists is really what they are. That now tells us this beyond reproach person in the Trump administration. He's not off. He's not weird. He's just, he knows everything and Trump doesn't. And so we're going to take him at his word. It's like taking a word to the guy in the office who's like 27 and thinks he ought to be running the place. And you're like, dude, what you don't know is so much bigger than what you know. By the way, do you know why they're doing this? I'm telling you why. This doesn't have anything to do with Trump being erratic. Trump is shattering economic record after economic record after economic record with the policies that in his erraticness he supposedly hatched somehow. Somehow he's so crazy and erratic he's managed to double the 2% growth rate these people said would be permanent, the new normal, in 19 months. If that's erratic for you, I want crazy people everywhere in this government. Total nuts. But no, but you know why this is happening? This is happening because, have you been watching what's going on around the edges? Andrew McCabe, the number 2, who really is the number 2 at the FBI, who got fired. They've impaneled a grand jury, right? And they're calling folks before the grand jury, looking to indict him. Did you see that? Yeah, and did you see the press conference with all the congressional leaders yesterday, begging Trump to declassify the FISA warrant and the papers, the documents surrounding it, because there are crimes in there? Did you see that? This is it's falling apart. It's crumbling right before our eyes. We just, last week, we busted the Department of Injustice for falsifying evidence for profit. Hillary paid for it. That was last week. The wheels are coming off at full speed. So the only thing they can do is make the president look crazy and erratic, the media, so that when all this comes out, it'll sound like a loony conspiracy theory when he talks about it. That's all they got. That is the only move they got left. Listen to the way they talk here. You can practically hear the panic in their voices.
This is unbelievable. This is a presidency. This is a genuine constitutional crisis. We have a presidency which is off the rails.
Unnamed senior official talked about whispers among cabinet members about the 25th Amendment and invoking that. Is that something you think should be discussed?
Desperation for us. Desperation.